Welcome to another edition of We Need to Talk About Movies, brought to you by banterflix.com. And now, here's your host, Jim McLean.
Hello. Yes, I am your host, Jim McLean. Welcome to the latest episode of We Need to Talk About Movies, a podcast brought to you by the Banterflix film review website, cinematic discussion with a Northern Irish accent. If this is your first time checking out the show, then welcome to the madness. If, however, you've been listening to us for a while, then thank you for continuing to check in with the show. Maybe you're one of our patrons, so an even bigger thank you for that. We have a packed show, as always, this week. I'm going to be talking via Zoom with local filmmaker Adam Neeson about Malignant, James Wan's latest horror film, which is out in cinemas now. You'll also hear my interview with Christine Molloy, one half of the directorial duo behind Rose Plays Julie, which is out in cinemas now. And you can also hear my interview with filmmaker John Watts about The War Below, which is available on various VOD services now. So it's a packed show, as I've said. We've loads to get into, so I think we'll crack on and get into this week's episode.
If you want the truth, Neo, you're going to have to follow me.
The only thing that matters to you is still here. I know it's why you're still fighting and why you will never give up.
You don't know me.
So that's a clip of The Matrix Resurrection, which is out in cinemas later this year. Well, COVID dependent. We'll have to just keep everything crossed. And joining me now via Zoom is local filmmaker Adam Neeson. Hi there, Adam.
Evening, Jim.
Adam, what's your thoughts? Are you excited about this next installment for The Matrix, which the press materials have very much made it blatantly obvious that this is a sequel to the original Matrix? They keep mentioning the original Matrix. They do not mention those two wonderful sequels that everyone loves dearly. But are you excited about this?
I am. I watched the original Matrix about 2 nights ago. I showed it to my girlfriend who had never seen before. And she said that she liked it, but she would never watch it again, which is, just the worst news she could have told me. But this new Matrix looked pretty good. I wasn't excited when they announced it because I was kind of like, the original Matrix is amazing and the two sequels have good parts, but overall aren't very satisfying. But it seems like this new one is at least interesting. There's some shots in the trailer of clips from the original Matrix. So I don't know, is it some sort of like Inception style storytelling that they're trying to bring in, where the Matrix that we watched 22 years ago was just a story that was told, and now this new thing is the actual real world, kinda? I don't know. But yeah, it looks pretty exciting.
Yeah, if you start to think about it too much, your head hurts. That's the only thing. I don't know. I'm going to sit, like, this is no way, this is pretty much the equivalent of Jim just sitting on the fence. I think it's either going to be really shit or it's going to be really good. And I'm saying that as someone who thinks the two Matrix sequels are pretty much the definition of cinematic meh. I think I agree with you. There's things about them that work quite well. There's some interesting ideas it explores, but they just get bogged down. And having rewatched them, because I'm trying to think, it's probably with COVID I've kind of lost all sense of time, but I think it was the year before the pandemic, the Matrix was re-released to celebrate its 20th anniversary. I remember going to see it in Odeon. You just remember what a fresh film that was, and then I said, right, maybe the sequels aren't that bad. And it's like, oh, they're just terrible kind of Basil exposition all the time and just bogged down. Particularly near the end, it gets really bogged down by its own worthiness in that sense. But they're fine, but they could have very easily been, one film. It just felt like a kind of an assembly cut that's been split into two. But I don't know. I'm not going to let myself get excited about this next Matrix film. I'm kind of hoping I'm just going to wash over me. And it's going to be one of my cinematic treats for the year. I know A Night in Soho is going to be out next month in October, I think. Edgar Wright's next film. And I've stayed away from all the marketing campaign for that. That's going to be my cinematic treat. And I think potentially The Matrix Resurrection. It's weird it's out at Christmas, but then I suppose it makes sense it's out at Christmas. I don't know. And then we have poor old Morpheus. Morpheus has been recast, and it's I apologize, I can never remember the actor's name. I know he's in Candyman and he's in Watchmen.
Something.
Yeah,
Second.
yeah. Yes, indeed. I know that Joe and I struggled terribly on the Candyman podcast, but no, I think he's a great actor. I think it's all. Look, hey, this is the Matrix, the Wachowskis. You know, they love to fuck with your heads. That's what they love to do, and I love that they are filmmakers that embrace the power of cinema and the power of what the visual medium can do, because I know they did Cloud Atlas, which I kind of love for all its schlocky badness that it is, but I just love the kind of sheer. I know that wasn't the Wachowskis on that. It was also the director of Run Lola Run. I think was on that as well. But I don't know. Was that a film you were a fan of, or are you like so many just on the naysayers in Cloud Atlas?
I actually do love it. I seen it twice. I seen it when it came out and was like, what is this? This is just nonsense. And then me and an old flatmate sat, and he was watching it, and I walked in about 20 minutes in, and the second time watching it, I was like, oh, I get it. Like, for as ridiculous as it is, and as, people playing different genders and different races, it is ambitious. But the emotional core of the story, especially the two, is it Ben Whishaw and somebody, they're in a gay relationship. That little piece of the story, I remember me and my flatmate sat crying towards the end because we just thought it was fucking incredible.
Yeah, it's a film I haven't seen in a while, but I loved it, and it's a film that I kind of love even more because Tom Hanks is in it. We get to see Tom Hanks doing something different and not Tom Hanksy, which is what I love about it even more. It's a film maybe I do need to give a rewatch, but I am a big fan of it. I know it's flawed, it's imperfect, but then not everything has to be perfect. Not everything is Naked Gun. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's The Matrix. We're kind of, I think maybe quietly, kind of pensitively looking forward to it, but here's one, Adam, because I know we're going to be talking about Malignant shortly, but, another horror movie franchise is coming back. You just can't kill it. We have Paranormal Activity, Next of Kin. This is going to be, I think it's going to be early next year, March, I think, time it's going to be released. Are you a fan of the Paranormal Activity franchise? Do you think there's room for another installment?
I don't, I've seen the first 4, maybe. And I don't really like them. I kind of watched them with people because they were like, "Oh, you like horror movies? You'll like this." But it's not really my cup of tea. I just don't get scared. I just don't get terrified by like a lamp slightly moving. But if someone is coming in fresh with a good idea to bring this back, so many years after the last one, it's worth a watch just to see if they've got any new ideas.
Well, apparently this one, and this is in the States now, it's going to have an R rating. So I don't know. I don't know what the rest of them were. I don't know what the rest of them were rated at. I think they were 15 at most here. Look, I like the first one. I think the first one has its charm. I think because it reminds me so much of Ghostwatch, which I love. And hey, that's just probably an age thing more than anything else. Ghostwatch has just hit me right at the right time. I watched it that night on BBC One and was terrified and, well, fucking petrified, let's be honest, by Pipes, Mr. Pipes. And I think that's why I had a fondness for the first one. Again, they just kind of pulled on every bit of that cash cow to get as much money out of it. I think by the end, is it the Ghost Dimension or something? I think it was in 3D. I think I remember seeing it because my lovely wife has a fondness for the Paranormal Activity films. I'm not fussed. Like, as you say, a lamp moving or a light flickering is not going to be something that terrifies me. And that kind of, because I want to come back to that actually with Malignant actually as well. I don't know how best to put it, but that pressure noise that you get in particularly in Paranormal Activity, that's where I first became aware of it, to let us as viewers know the presence of a demonic entity. That we'll come back to that, because that does feature a little bit in Malignant, but I don't want to talk too much about that film now. Anything else, Adam? I know we're going to very quickly move on to other parts of the podcast, but anything else movie-wise has caught your attention? Movie news-wise, I should say, caught your attention over the last couple of days?
I'm not too sure. The only thing, you're saying that the Last Night at Soho is your little movie treat for this year. There was a trailer I seen the other day for, I forgive me, I can't remember the person's name. I think it's Julie. She directed Raw, and her new movie is called Titan. I think it's Titane. And I believe the QFT are showing it as part of London Film Festival, I think. But that's my little treat for the end of the year, because I think Raw is one of the best movies in the last 10 years, and the insanity of this Titan trailer is, I can't fucking wait to watch it.
I haven't even seen the trailer for it. I'm staying away from it. I love Raw. I just think Raw was... I always remember, I think it was the Glasgow Film Festival. I went over, and I think it was part of Fright Fest. And I can't remember the name of the film, but there was something that was meant to be screening in its place. And it was, I think, like a sci-fi film with Matt Smith that I think seems to have disappeared completely off the planet. And the kind of thing, I'd booked a ticket for this film just because it was there. I think I was kind of going over for a bit of programming, for looking for ourselves, kind of looked for stuff, and also kind of putting out the feelers even back then for the Dark Edges that were coming back to in October. And I remember kind of going in, she's like, oh, we're so sorry. Like, someone phoned me from the GFT in Glasgow, and like, really sorry, but that film has been postponed. It's been pulled by the producers, but at the last minute, we've been able to get a film raw. Would you like to transfer your ticket over? And you're like, yep, yes, please. Because I remember hearing all the stories about it when it was, I think it was in America, at Toronto, I think, where people had passed out from watching it because it was this intense and gory, and you're like, it's not going to be like that. And I mean, it has its moments. It's I wouldn't say it's a film that would shock me or disgust me in any ways, but I just think Raw is just, if you've never seen it, watch it. That's the only thing I can say. Even if you're not a hardened horror fan, seek it out, because I don't know. I mean, it has a horror elements. There's no denying that, but I just think it's superb, and it's proof that kind of what you're coming back to what you mentioned earlier on, Adam, about when people assume what a horror movie's like and what a horror fan enjoys, and they think like Paranormal Activity, oh, this is it, or we'll come back to this, the Conjuring movies, this is what it's like. No. You know, as I always say, horror is much more than busty women running in fields, being chased by a fellow with a big knife. And I know I'm being very broad sweeping when I say that, but it's much, much more than that. And a film like Raw is just proof of that. I love it, and I can't wait. I've stayed away from the trailers, although you've tempted me now to watch it. You bastard. You bastard, Adam. But no, that, and I didn't actually realise QFT were screening that as part of the London Film Festival, because I know the Lighthouse have announced today, I think it's December, I think it's getting a release. I think, so I hadn't even noticed at the QFT, so I may have to seek that out and get a ticket for that. But yeah, I can't think of anything else massive in the world of movies in the last kind of couple of days since we last recorded, and this is always the podcasting curse, because the minute we stop recording, something massive happens. Like the last time we recorded, the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer broke, and you're like, let's not talk about that. But anyway, so I think we shall move on, and we've got the first of 2 interviews on this week's pod, I am going to be playing. First up will be my interview with John Watts, who's co-written and directed The War Below, World War I drama, which is available now on VOD services. We played a shorter version of this on this week's episode of the TV show, and here's a longer version.
The Germans have built bunkers 30 feet below ground level. Now we've thrown everything we've got at them, and nothing. We're going to tunnel under no man's land, blow the enemy to kingdom come.
Still don't see what this has to do with us.
We don't have the expertise, but you men do.
I'm going there to dig.
Why you?
They need people who can dig the clay.
Don't they have miners over there or something?
It's my duty, my responsibility.
Your responsibility is to be here with your family.
I didn't realize that meant putting our war effort into the hands of uneducated, untrained civilians.
Give me 4 months. Can you do it in time?
I don't know.
So that's a clip of The War Below, which is available now, and I'm joined now by the film's director, John Watts. Hello to John.
Hello, very nice to meet you. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us, and this is a truly incredible story. I mean, I will touch on this. I wasn't aware of this story.
To be honest with you, I hadn't known that much about it either. It was when the centenary was coming along, and I was reading lots of articles and things about the First World War. And I read this article about the Royal Engineers and how they tunnelled under no man's land. And to be honest with you, I'd never heard of it. I mean, I remember doing it at school, history and stuff at school, but they'd never covered this bit. All I kind of remembered as World War I was people sitting in trenches and then waiting to go over the top. So, this was a story which I hadn't heard. And I thought, well, if I haven't heard it, I'm sure quite a lot of people haven't probably heard it. So I sent it to my writing partner, Thomas Woods, and said, take a look at this. What do you think? And he read it and said, it's an amazing story that, we think should be put out and people might enjoy it, or at least learn something and then go on to find out more about it, really. So, I mean, these guys were amazing. They weren't actually always trained soldiers. Some of them were picked up on the Thursday and they were in France by the Tuesday. So, they weren't trained soldiers. They were normal guys that went in there to just dig, and they just did as what they were told to do. And, they were amazing people. So I think the more people that get to know this kind of story and our history, I think is a really good thing.
In terms of the project, once you became aware of it, and then when it mothballed from that idea, from taking that story and then bringing it to the final screen, could I ask you what your relationship, like what way does that professional relationship work with yourself and Thomas as writing partners? How do you kind of work on this process? How did you work on this process?
Yeah, well, we've been working together for about 15, 20 years now. So it's been quite a long time that we've known each other. And we started writing a number of years ago. But before that, we actually had a company where we made TV commercials and other video and things as well. So we've known each other kind of production side, and then what we always wanted to do was obviously to be in film. So we've been trying over the years to get into film and trying to get funding, which, as you guys know, isn't easy in the UK. But we were writing more and more scripts, and always at the start they're not very good. But the more you do it and the more years you kind of work together, it gets better. So this was a project that we had we had these producers in America who we've worked with for a couple of years, that we were kind of sending stuff all backwards and forwards, and they were liking certain things and not liking certain things. And then when we were going to do this, they said, we've got some funding from over here in the States. Have you got anything that we can shoot in the UK that would work with this funding? So we kind of said, yeah, of course we have. We gave them this idea. We'd only written about 10 pages at this point. And they said, yeah, we really like it. The investors like it. Can we see the script? And we said, well, when do you need to see it? And they said, oh, the end of the month. So that was 3 weeks away. So we had to write the entire script in 3 weeks, the first draft at least, to then send to them. And then they read it and said, we like it. The investors like it. Let's get it done. So from years and years and years of trying to get things progressed in various projects, this was by far the quickest from inception to getting it kind of green lit. So which was kind of an amazing for us, but we were just very lucky, I think, at that time as well.
So once it is greenlit, you know the project is happening.
Yeah.
At what point did you start to kind of think about the idea of bringing that vision and that story to the big screen and the challenges that go with that? You're clearly working and doing your best with a limited budget. This is not, Sam Mendes 1917, but when you go from being greenlit, what point then do you start to realize the challenges of bringing your vision to the big screen?
Well, we knew right from the start that there was going to be, a challenge. 1917 budget 100 million, ours 500,000. We know it's going to be completely different, and we have to work with that. And so we have to, encapsulate the story in a smaller amount of sets, a smaller amount of actors, not have loads of extras. So it was trying to get something that would work as a story, but within limitations of what we had. Set wise, production wise, I'd been to Beamish as a child. If anyone's ever been, it's an amazing place. I love it to bits. It's a living museum. So you wouldn't be able to recreate this kind of thing yourself. It would cost an absolute fortune. It would be impossible to do. So we were very, very fortunate that they let us go there and use a number of their sets, including the high street, which really helped us a lot. I also knew a guy called Taff Gillingham, who is a military historian, and he runs a company called Khaki Devils. Now, they had the trenches and all the costumes and props that were, specific for World War I. So again, we knew that it was going to be right, even down to the insignias for the Royal Engineers and what have you. So people would say, yeah, they're the right ones, because there's nothing more annoying for people than if you're putting the wrong badges on, all that kind of stuff. So that was fantastic. And then finally, for the tunnels, we built those in a big hangar near Suffolk. So they were tunnels that we could actually move around, so we could reconfigure it. That it didn't always look the same, because that was kind of one of our hardest points. We've only got a small amount of budget to build this thing with. How are we going to get the most use out of it? And our production designer Caroline Steiner was amazing, and she said, well, we can do this and that, and so you can reconfigure stuff around, and that way you won't know that you're shooting in kind of the same place. And then our director of photography, Nick Cook, he and with myself came up with the idea of just using the candles to light the underground stuff. So that was great, because again, it was a great feeling and atmosphere inside there when you've just got these candles. It was really scary actually when all the lights were off except these candles, and I think it added a lot to the film as well. So we didn't have a big budget, but we tried to maximize what we could do with that budget by just trying to be clever with it, and not going over the top of jibs or anything like that. We didn't have the money for that. So it's just trying to be clever as much as we possibly could, and stretch it as much as we could, really. Yeah.
Yeah, because again, I wanted to mention, the cinematography and your production design, and I've already mentioned the costumes. They all add. Those do a lot of the heavy lifting for the film. It really is. Yeah. I'm just being honest. I really enjoyed this, but then I am a sucker for a World War I drama. It's something my late father would have absolutely loved. Anything with the World War, both 1 or 2, my father would have absolutely made me watch, and that's why again I have that certain sense of appreciation for them and enjoy them. And I wanted to push you a little bit further on that relationship with your DOP. Yeah, and working with that, because again, you have a lot of challenges, and I know you've almost answered that question already, but could I go back and just kind of get you to expand on that and working with your DOP, particularly in those tunnel sequences? I know you've kind of alluded to that, but just working with your DOP on those scenes in particular.
Sure. I mean, Nick was, he's an absolutely amazing guy. So if anyone, looks at his stuff, it's just always looks beautiful. And we tried before we started to really just talk through and look at lots of different pictures. And he sent lots of references from different films that we had a look at and said, would this work? Would that work? To try and get the atmosphere right. And I know he did a lot of tests with candles and these kind of candelabra contraptions where he put a number of them together in like this big burning thing, which he'd have off screen, so that you could see how much light we'd need and how much light we could get away with having. Because I don't like it when you're watching a film and it's supposed to be dark, but you can't see anything. And that was my one thing I said to I don't want that, because there's nothing more annoying than squinting at the screen saying, I can't see what's going on. So that was kind of important to us, that we'd have this feeling and have what the miners would have had down there, which was candles. That's how they would have got about as well. So it was a double thing for us, that's what kind of we wanted. But we tried many other different things to get a kind of authenticity, and to try and, again, a production value. We decided to go for anamorphic lenses because I love the look of the anamorphic lenses, and he said this will be the best way to go, and we were very lucky. We got very good deals on all our kit, and we just had to be clever again with it. We had actually two. We shot on the Alexa Mini, but we had two of them. So one we could always have on a Ronin, and one we could then have on the tripod. So we didn't have to swap around. It takes about half an hour, 40 minutes to kind of break it down off the tripod and then put it on the Ronin, and vice versa. Because we only had 21 days to film it all in. That's kind of like, you need to average about 5 minutes of screen time every single day. So we knew we wouldn't have time to do too much. So again, we just kind of tried to prepare as much as humanly possible beforehand. I'd do kind of schematics, and then we'd go through them, and then we'd have storyboards. And so we'd have everything planned as much as we could, so that on set, we had more time to just jiggle things around and to play about with it if we could.
I always ask this question when someone brings up post-production or pre-production, storyboarding and preparation that way. So when you go from that process to what you're planning and your storyboarding, what then is your memories of going from the storyboarding process to the realities of filming on set?
Well, I'd been to all of the location. I like to have a look around everywhere first, because I'm one of these I know some people don't like to prepare. They don't like storyboards. They think it kind of, stifles their creativity and things. But for me, it would give me a heart attack if I just turned up and said, right, what are we doing? So, I just really couldn't do that. That's not the kind of person I am. So I tried to plan as much as I can, and then I can then change it when we're there, because Nick could say, have we looked at this angle, or let's have a look at this, and this place over here is a little bit better. So we had that flexibility, which was great. But I'd go everywhere beforehand, and I'd take lots of photos, and then I would sit down and draw a schematic first, and then I'd give that to our storyboard artist, who would then draw the storyboards from my schematics of where the camera would be and where the actors would be, and how the camera would move. We'd then take that to Nick, and Nick could have a look, and then we kind of alter a little bit. Now, some of them, they don't work out. Some of them seems great when you're doing it on the schematics and on the storyboard. When you get there, you think, it doesn't quite work like that. Or maybe you're running out of time. And so those 5 camera angles you've got, well, you've got 2. Do you know what I mean? So you have to pick which is the best ones and what you think will work. So I think for me, if I've done the preparation, then I have the confidence that we'll be able to at least get it what we want. Whereas if I didn't do that, I think you'd waste so much time, you wouldn't get half the film shot. If you've got months, great. If you haven't, I personally couldn't do that myself.
We've talked quite a bit about the technical side of things, talking about kind of behind the camera, and we've talked about kind of preparation for the project as well. But yeah. I suppose we have to as well applaud your cast, because I can't fault anybody. Can you tell us a little bit about pulling that cast together and who our viewers and listeners will see in the feature?
Yeah, I mean, they were absolutely, I couldn't ask for anyone better, to be honest with you. As like kind of a first time feature film director, you're always kind of worried that things are going to run away from you, or that people are going to have a big ego, or they're going to clash, or this kind of things. Our casting director, Shakira Dowling, she did an amazing job getting people that, because it's an ensemble, it's getting people that she knew or thought would work together on screen as well as off screen, and that they would be able to live that character, and they truly were just fantastic. They're lovely people. We see each other and go for a pint and all this kind of thing now, but it was just on set, it had that feeling that everyone wanted to be there, which is the most important, especially when you've got low budget, you've got low amount of time. Everyone was 100%, they were behind the film. They wanted to be there, not for the cash or anything else. They wanted to be there because they wanted to do the film. They really enjoyed playing that character. And I know Tom Goodman-Hill, who played Hellfire Jack, he always says, oh, I'd like to do another one to kind of carry on Hellfire's journey, which in real life. He did some amazing things, but they were brilliant. And when you're working with professionals like that, you don't have to worry as much. Well, I didn't have to worry as much because I knew that within a take or two, they'd get it. And I wouldn't have to kind of be holding their hand or anything like that. If anything, you know, it was the other way around a little bit, you know. So when we had so much to get through in a day and people can just nail it straight away without you having to do anything, for me, it took so much pressure off, and I will always be thankful to them for just doing such an amazing job and for helping me out as well, for making it a lot easier for me.
I know you have other things to do today. I can't take all your time this afternoon, but just because you've mentioned as a first-time filmmaker, what did you take from this as a project that you will go on to your next project, the next project after that? What did you take from that?
I took a lot, actually. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about kind of the way interacting with the whole crew. Before you do it, you're always nervous because you haven't, obviously, if you haven't done some maybe shorts or you've done commercials, and you think, I kind of know the area, but you don't know exactly what it's like when people are looking at you for decisions. And that's one thing I have learned, is that you don't have to have the right decision. You just have to be able to make a decision. So, for example, like in the production design, there was an office and Haig was writing with a pen. And they said, well, here's 6 pens. Which one do you want? It's like, well, it's just a pen. It doesn't matter. But that is, you have to make a decision. And everyone's looking for you to make decisions. So as long as you're that kind of person that you're saying, okay, I can make decisions. I want that one. I want this one, whatever. That's what people are looking for. They're looking for you to just kind of stand up and say what you want. So I did learn that, rather than saying, oh, I don't know, I don't mind. Which one do you think? You know, so making decisions and just going with your gut instinct as well, I thought was a big learning thing for me. In post-production, I learned that it takes a lot longer than you think. I did the VFX myself, so I didn't give myself probably enough time to get all the things that I wanted. But again, it's a whole learning thing, isn't it? And it was one of the best experiences of my life. I loved every single second of it. It's like, as soon as we stopped doing it, I missed it, and I wanted to go back and do it again. So it was just absolutely amazing, and I would do it again tomorrow if I could.
And I just wanted to ask you, just from a sheer storytelling point of view, now the film's out, we can see it, viewers and our viewers and our listeners can watch it now. From a storytelling point of view, how proud you are? Do you be able to bring this story, this World War I story, to the big screen and to viewers?
I am very proud of it. I hope that people will see it for what it is, and to realise that it's about these miners and how brave they were and the amazing jobs that they did. And they didn't actually get the recognition that I think that they should get. It's even when they got back home, even at the time, they were kind of shunned and they found it hard to get jobs and things like this. And they didn't talk about it. They didn't go around saying, "Oh, look at me, I'm a hero." They didn't do that. They just got on with the job that they were paid to do, and they just did it. So I think these people should be remembered for the heroism and the amazing job that they did, and I don't think they should ever be forgotten. So I hope that people will find out more about them, and all the miners. I say there were thousands of miners of the Royal Engineers. So I didn't know about it, and I'm 41 now. I never knew about it. I don't know if other people know about it. It should be something that people know about. So if the film lets people see what these conditions were like and kind of feel how it must have been, then that's only a good thing as far as I can see.
So John, look, thank you very much for your time. I couldn't have said that better myself. The War Below, it's available now in limited cinemas, and it's also available on VOD platforms, so check it out. John, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with future projects.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So that's my interview with John Watts, and as I said in that interview, I definitely would recommend seeking that out. It's a low-budget World War I drama, but it tells a fantastic story I'd never heard of, a story of miners working on the trenches, and yeah, as I said, it's available on VOD services, and I think Adam will kind of crack on, and we'll kind of get stuck into Malignant. We're going to play a clip in just a minute, but do you want to set the scene for our listeners? Do you want to tell them as much as you think they need to know? And we probably will be a little bit spoilerific on the other side of this clip. So if you haven't seen Malignant yet, we would probably recommend not listening to the rest of the pod until you have seen it, unless you just love spoilers or you just don't care. But set the scene. Tell our listeners as much as you think they need to know going in about Malignant.
Malignant is directed by horror movie maker and Aquaman director James Wan, as he returns to his horror roots, based on a story where a lady is getting visions of a serial killer going about the city of Seattle, and she can see these murders taking place. She can't get involved, but she's having visions of them, and these visions are coming true. And as she's getting closer to these killings happening, it might be something that is personal from her past coming back together.
With that, Adam, you've perfectly set the scene. Let's play a clip of Malignant.
When I was young, something happened to me.
Stop saying that.
Daddy, who are you talking to?
Gabriel.
Is he your imaginary friend?
Whatever you went through before you joined our family, it hurt you in a way that I can't even imagine. You created him.
Daddy, what's going on?
So that you could survive.
So that's a clip of the film, and Adam will kind of take a deep dive and just get stuck right in. Will not be spoilerific right from the get-go, but generally, what do you think of this?
I'll structure my review as the movie itself is structured. I'll say at the start that James Wan is a very impressive horror director in the past, and going into Malignant, it's very clear that he's taken inspiration from some Italian giallo movies. You see in the poster, you've got your black glove killer, neon red all over the poster, close-ups of eyeballs, stuff like that. The story is quite similar to The Eyes of Laura Mars or Stephen King's The Dark Half, kind of. But realistically, when you actually go into the movie and start watching it, starting at this very first scene, the movie could more be compared to something like Basket Case or one of the Scary Movie movies. It really is the cinematic prank of this generation, and I would compare it to M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, where you think it's one thing going in, and if you're not prepared, then you may strap in because you're about to get a completely different film than what was advertised to you. I'll say.
So can I just cut in there?
Yes.
Just listening, just to cut across you. I don't mean to, but is that a positive for you? I know maybe I'm cutting in too early, but I'm kind of getting mixed vibes here from you. I mean, is that a positive for you in that sense, that you think you're going to be served up one thing, and then what you actually get is something? Well, I don't want to talk about it too much yet, but just that's just bonkers.
Jim, I've been sitting on this for a week, and I must say that I don't know if I like or hate this movie. it's when I was sitting watching it, I was like, yeah, I enjoy this. This is, the acting is a bit weird and things are slightly off. And whenever the Pixies Were As My Mind came into the score of the movie, I was like, does he know this isn't a good thing? That this is like a 2002 horror movie, like your House of Wax, like those weird Platinum Dune remake films from the early 2000s. And it's like, James Wan is a competent director, and although the Conjuring movies aren't the best things in the world, they definitely know how to pace themselves and are well enough written in the horror world that you can get what's going on. Whereas in this, I'm trying my best not to spoil the second half of the movie here. In this, it's the first scene of the movie is so Sam Raimi kind of, reanimator sort of bonkersness that, and then the actual opening credits music is like this really weird late 90s rock song over medical footage, and then the next 20 minutes is your standard James Wan. This woman lives in a house and spooky stuff is happening. And then the next 20 minutes is, oh, we need to figure out this mystery, see what's going on. Is where you kind of get your jello. And then the next 20 minutes is the end of Maniac Cop 2, where there's just madness going on.
I find no negative in anything you said there. I mean,
Exactly.
Here's the thing for me, right? I went into this, and my biggest fear going into this was that this was going to be James Wan's return to horror, and then at some point in the film's latter stages, we would have a tenuous connection to the Conjuring universe, and then it would all be tied up in that, in the same way that, wasn't it The Curse of La Llorona, I think, was originally sold, or there was one, I can't remember, there was one of those films that was initially sold. I think it was The Curse of La Llorona.
I think you're right.
Was sold as, oh no, it's not part of the Conjuring universe. It's like, well, why is that actor that was in, is it just coincidence that he's in Annabelle and he's playing a priest? Yeah, total coincidence. And then near the end, it's like, oh no, it's not. It's like, all right, fuck, it's part of the Conjuring universe. That was my greatest fear going in. And all the things you mentioned there, I don't disagree with the thing you said. Like, the opening's just bonkers. I mean, they might as well have kind of Freddy Krueger popping up. It's like, let's cut that evil out of you. Because it's like, what is it they say? Let's cut this count. Oh, what is it she says? Because of course I can't remember it. There's a line she says, like, let's cut this cancer out of you or something. I can't remember what they say.
I think it is, yeah.
It's so on the nose, and it's so kind of going, okay, if I'm honest, I kind of, well, yes and no. I kind of guessed where the film was going to go. I don't think I guessed quite rightly in the last 20 minutes exactly how it was going to unfold, but I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's not going to be supernatural as I thought, or as the trailer has pitched it to. And I mean, I've talked about this before. Trailers lie. Marketing men and women will sell their soul to get you to buy a cinema ticket, to get your bum on a cinema ticket to watch that movie, and they'll sell you whatever you want. So James Wan horror, I was looking back at the trailers just before we started the pod, and it's like, it is very Conjuring-y. No, pardon me. It is very Conjuring-y. There's no getting away from that. And the thing I love about it is that it is so bonkers. It is just the fact that it's like James Wan on acid, and it's like, right, we've got this idea. I can't talk about it too much yet because we're not spoiling, but it's like, right, this is the idea. This is what we're going with. And all the Dario Argento films, and like, people will go, oh, what do you mean, like Suspiria, Inferno? And you're like, no, like the really shitty later ones, like The Card Player, Phenomena, all that kind of stuff. That stuff that's just out there. And he's like, that's the kind of film I want to make. And I have to admit, like, halfway through this film, I was like, oh fuck, this is just going to be another run-of-the-mill Conjuring film. And coming back to what you said, I mean, I am a fan of James Wan. I mean, I am. I mean, looking back, because I think when Conjuring 3 was just released early this year, I went back and watched. I couldn't be bothered going down to Annabelle and The Nun and all that stuff, but I watched the first two films, and he is a stylish director. He is a style. I mean, he does things like and even in this film, there's some great overhead shots, particularly in the sequences in the house early on. It's like, you don't see that level of ambition. Now, I'm not sure if it's the same DOP that James Wan's always worked with on this project or not. I don't know, but he has a visual style, and his films have a visual flair. My issue is the fact that because he's exec produced so much of the expanded Conjuring films, that they all try to replicate his style, and they all end up as like, well, you're all trying to look like a James Wan film, but there's no James Wan present. Yes, he's producing, but as John Carpenter will tell you with exec producing the Halloween films, you don't do that much. And that's why, I mean, I know I'm jumping off on a tangent. It's actually I quite like the third Conjuring film that was just out this year, as I say, the Devil Made Me Do It, because it didn't try, or it wasn't as guilty of trying to replicate what had been done before. I don't think it's perfect, not by any means, but then I have a real soft spot for Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, which was another big surprise. We don't see Patrick Wilson popping up in a James Wan film. It's the first time in a long time that hasn't happened. But once the film goes into its, if you want to say, final act, there was that sense of kind of going, like, after we've had, as you've mentioned, we've had the James Wan Conjuring stuff, and then we have a bit of Nancy Drew going on, and it just then goes, as you say, it just goes on acid, and it's just as if James Wan has just said, fuck it, just go for it. And it's the first time in a long, long time, genuinely, Adam, where I've just said, you know what, I'm going to go with this. I'm going to fucking go with this. And I loved it. I can truthfully say, I don't think it's going to be in my top 10 films by the end of the year, but it's a film, you know, I always say this, the film, Friday night, I have a beer, a bit of pizza, I will happily watch this in the same way that I will happily watch those schlocky Dario Argento films where, as a cinematic force, he's kind of done, but he's still Dario Argento. There's still little, it's a bit like Brian De Palma. Brian De Palma, you know, okay, yes, he steals a lot from Hitchcock, we know that. But Brian De Palma, you know, for every kind of blowout, there's kind of real, like all the classics and all the stuff that he does, there's just complete trash that De Palma has put out over the years, but they're stylish trash. There's no denying that. I enjoyed this much more than I thought I was, and I enjoyed this much more than I thought I would. And more importantly, I enjoyed this much more than I thought I would at the halfway mark of this film. Yeah. Once it kind of reveals itself, and I wasn't like, can I ask you, were you surprised? We will come in. Well, I suppose we don't have to spoil it. We can talk around it as much as we can. But were you surprised by? I know it's hard not to be surprised by what happens in this film, but were you that surprised by the revelation?
Not really. I have a really bad time with movies because stuff will happen in the first minute of a movie and I'll go, oh, I've solved it. Like if you're watching the first 2 minutes of Usual Suspects, I'm like, oh, it's Kevin Spacey because of the way he walks.
Fuck's sake, Adam, people might not have seen it. Jesus.
It's been 25 years, Jim, come on.
Next you're going to say it's a sled in Citizen Kane. Oh, for fuck's sake. He's a she, The Crying Game, he was dead, or as my favourite plot twist in Always Sunny in Philadelphia, that actor was Bruce Willis in The Sixth Sense.
I would say that, you know, this kind of compares to the ending of Sleepaway Camp. Even though the ending of Sleepaway Camp happens right at the end, but it's still a kind of twist. But no, I kind of figured out there's a bit near the start where there's a scene of domestic abuse and you see a husband pushing the main character. He pushes her head into the wall and it cracks the wall and she falls down. And at that point I went, oh, the movie's called Malignant, and Malignant is like a tumor that's in your head that's been there for a while and now it's woken up. Oh. And that kind of, I was like, this is what it's going to be. So I said, going through it, being like, this is what it's going to be. Until, because I did kind of think it was like Stephen King's The Dark Half. I don't know if you've ever seen that, have you?
Not in a long, long time. Not in a long time.
But it's the whole, you know, is it Timothy Hutton?
I think you're right.
He has this alternative personality. It's the whole Stephen King, Richard Bachman thing of, you know, these two personalities, and he gets found out and he gives up the false name, but then this false name actually comes back as a killer. I thought it was going to be like that, where these two things are separate, whereas it's not really, try not to spoil it, but it's not really separated.
I wasn't going to go for a horror reference to kind of talk around what was going on. It's a bit Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in kind of the way things are going on. Or the film I was weirdly thinking, and it's not really connected. I don't know if you've ever seen it. An early Richard E. Grant film, or not an early Richard E. Grant film from the 80s, How to Get Ahead in Advertising. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that in a sense. And I know people will have seen those films. Who hasn't seen Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, will probably know right away what we're talking about and the kind of plot twist. Because that's what my wife said coming home in the car. She's like, for fuck's sake, didn't expect it to go full Harry Potter in the end. You have with a bit of Voldemort kind of going on. But I enjoyed it. But here's the thing. I just want to bring in Adam on this, because this is a discussion we've had on and off now in the podcast for quite some time. And I know you had texted in some comments for the pod on the Candyman reboot. Because on that recording, I said I wasn't actually scared by Candyman. I'm not a massive fan of the new Candyman film, and I don't want to pull on that thread because I felt kind of self-conscious enough kind of talking about it on the last podcast. But I wasn't that fussed in Candyman because I wasn't scared. It didn't scare me, or it didn't do that thing that I always kind of say, I don't need to be scared by a horror film, but it needs to at least kind of get under my skin, to creep me, to unsettle me, to have me thinking about it maybe 2-3 days, in the way, say, something like Censor has. I still find myself thinking about the last sequence in Censor, more for the music than anything else. But Candyman didn't do that for me. I think the best thing in Candyman is the use of shadow puppets, and the stuff that goes on in the closing credits is really powerful. But I didn't find it scary. So here's the thing for you. I mean, I wasn't scared. I sound like a hypocrite when I say this. I wasn't scared at any point, let's be honest, with Malignant. There was a few moments, like all James Wan films, where the composer does the scares for you. He pretty much jumps up behind you, creeps up behind you in your cinema seat and goes, boo. James Wan does that. And there's nothing wrong with a good jump scare. I mean, just look at The Exorcist 3. There's nothing wrong with a good jump scare. But Were you ever scared in this, and kind of what's your thoughts on that? And I suppose as well, I think from reading on either Twitter or on Facebook, Adam, I think you were a huge fan of Candyman. I know that's going off on a tangent, but with firing all those questions at you, were you scared at all during Malignant? Do you need to be scared by a horror film? And your thoughts on Candyman?
To just talk about Candyman quick. The reason I really liked Candyman was because there was no jump scares. There was no orchestra stings to tell you you need to be scared now. I can understand why yourself wouldn't like it, or some people wouldn't like it. But to me, Candyman was terror at the corner of the eye, is what I like to call it. I would compare it to I'm terrible with names today. But the movie Possum that came out a few years ago, that's the only movie in the last 10 years that's properly scared me. And in that movie, it's literally just a puppet going around a door frame that scared me, which is probably stupid. But with Malignant, and I was never afraid of Malignant. There's nothing in it that is kind of terrifying. James Wan can do really good horror without the stings, the jump scares. There's a bit in The Conjuring 2 when the little girl is summoning the ghost behind her in the chair, and I find that it's really a really effective scare. But horror movies don't need to make me scared. I'm just one of those people that I don't jump at things. But I like to see the reactions of people in cinemas jumping at things. Especially since I want to make horror movies for a living. It's good to see what makes people jump and what makes people not jump. What gives people the fear of leaving a cinema and checking behind them as they're going to the car. A Quiet Place is a good example of something that's not that scary, but the silence is the scary moment. It builds the tension. whenever you're in a silent moment in life, coming home from that movie or after watching that movie, you think to yourself, fuck, what if there was a monster to just burst through the window, like interrupting my normal way of life? But when you get to Malignant and it involves, you know, basket case-esque body horror, you're kind of sitting at the end going, this is madness. You know, there's a bit in a police station towards the end that kind of reminded me of Maniac Cop 2, I was saying before. That it literally just goes out of its way of not being horror anymore and just being an all-out action scene, which I know is something James Wan likes to do. He likes to do like one-shot action scenes. It was quite similar to, there's an action scene at the start of Aquaman that I was like, oh, he's just doing the exact same thing with different characters this time.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, James Wan, I think, you know, he is a horror filmmaker, but he is just generally a great filmmaker. I think it was at the Fast and Furious 7 he did Aquaman. He did a solid job on. It's nice to see him back within the horror genre. And just on that note, you know, yeah, as much as he's known for being someone who kind of really brought kind of, well, to an extent, brought kind of the big jump scare horror back to not just the mainstream, but Hollywood gold, or like a real kind of profitable cash cow. You look at how much money the Conjuring films have made, and I'm trying to think of, there's a sequence, I think, in the first Conjuring, just when you talk about that, just with I don't know necessarily if it would be a jump scare, but it's the sequence with I think it's the towel or the cloth in the wind, and it kind of gets caught up, and then it gets stuck on a figure that's kind of watching everything going on outside. Yeah, look, I mean, I like The Conjuring. I've said this before, and I've described that. I know it's a bit of a crude analogy, but see, I like stuff like Hereditary. I know there's other people who don't like Hereditary. I don't know if you're a fan of Hereditary or not, Adam.
I love it.
Those type of films, I would kind of say, film like that is like, for horror, is like a steak, right? It's really well done, well cooked steak, medium rare, just done nicely. And then sometimes you get films like The Conjuring that is just a big dirty cheeseburger. And as much as I love a nice steak every now and again, I love a fucking dirty cheeseburger of a film every so often. And that's the way it is. And I know it's crude, I know it's probably oversimplistic, and there was something just, maybe it's just with what's been going on and with the fact that coming back to the cinema and with the COVID pandemic, it's reminded me of how much I love going to the cinema. I love getting away and just seeing stuff like this that you just have no clue where it's going to go. And like that sequence you're talking about, the police station, it kind of reminded me, even to an extent, of something like even in Terminator. It's in that sheer madness when a film just, and I know the Terminator doesn't have this huge tonal change as what we have here, but just that sense of just sheer bedlam going on. And I was trying to think, when I was listening to you there talking, I was trying to think of another film that has went something similar. And once I don't like too much talking about the film because of the director's, well, it's not questionable, you know, they're known charges. But thinking about stuff like Jeepers Creepers, and that sense of when a film starts is one thing, and you get a sense of what it's going to be, and then by the latter stages, it just goes to an action movie. It starts as a kind of Texas Chainsaw-esque horror film, and then just goes into, again, unsurprisingly and funny enough, in a police station, it goes into sheer bedlam. So there we go. It's the Jeepers Creepers of our day, just without the child pedophilia. No, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much more you want to talk about Annabelle Wallis. I thought she was fine in the role. You know, you just don't know because, well, with the way it unfolds, I'm assuming that those sequences in the police station, I'm assuming that's not her. That's a stunt double. I guess that's pretty obvious. I thought she was fine in the role. There was times when you just want to go, I just wanted to pull that terrible wig. It just looked like a wig. And it just annoyed me. It's like the small hill I'm prepared to die on. It's like, just why wear that stupid wig? It looks like a wig. Just take it off. Just you probably have your own hair. But I thought it was fine in the role. Other actors that are here, I can't think there's not many there's not many faces I recognised, which is probably both a good thing and a bad thing for, you know, drawing people to the cinema. I think the draw here is James Wan, and you're probably going to tell me now there's someone I really obviously forgotten about.
No, nobody I can think of.
I don't know. Is there anything else you want to talk about the film?
I kind of want to talk about director's intent when it comes to genre. Like you were saying about Censor earlier on, which if anybody in the audience hasn't seen Censor, go see Censor. It's probably one of the best horror movies this year. With that movie, it's taken a genre of 80s horror and the video nasties, and it's applying it to its own film while also giving you a story worth watching. So by the end of Censor, there is touches in it that call back to things from the video nasties. With Malignant, James Wan, obviously his intent is to make these movies like late 90s Argento movies, and his intent is to make something similar to that but for the modern age. And while you can take bits of the movie and be like, yes, I can see where the references are coming from, I can see what he's referencing back to, there is bits in the movie when you're sitting watching it going, this is just flat out bad acting, or this is just flat out bad script writing. And you can say, well, it's a homage, but also it's not a homage when you're just sitting trying to watch a movie and think to yourself, these actors are shite, or this act, like the writing here is shite. Like the two detective characters who the main guy was okay, but then the sassy black cop who in my mind was just Wanda Sykes, but they couldn't get Wanda Sykes, so they got a younger woman in. When they go into a crime scene and meet the black rimmed CSI girl, and she's flirting with the lead detective. And by the way, the girl that plays the black rimmed glasses girl is James Wan's wife, recent wife, because you can tell because she's not a fucking very good actress. Whenever they're having scenes or talking, I was sitting going, I don't think I could bear this. I don't think I can bear the acting that is going on here. And you know that James Wan is a competent director. So is it his intent to give these people bad direction or bad line readings for the sake of the genre that he's trying to replicate?
I don't know whether it's meant to be verging on parody of those films. I don't know. I guess if we had James here, we could ask him and see what his intent was, because there is times where the dialogue is clunky. There's really clunky dialogue between the sisters, or the foster sisters, I should say, it's adopted sisters.
Yeah.
And even schlockier dialogue with the sister and her mother later on, when it's like they make revelations and it's like, let's stick this videotape on and watch it, and it's like, okay, somebody's just went, as I say, it just went batshit crazy. But what I like about Malignant, and it's one of a few films, I was saying this on this week's TV show with Leo McGuigan when we were talking about like the Marvel films. Like, as much as I enjoy the Marvel films, they're cinematic fodder, they're popcorn. You watch the film, you eat your popcorn, you go home. The Marvel stuff, I very rarely rewatch them unless they're on TV over Christmas on BBC One or something like that. But in my typical Jim McLean long-winded way, Adam, is what I'm trying to say is I would actually quite happily rewatch Malignant, and I think rewatching it a second time, you know what you're in for, and I think you would watch the film differently. In the first time, the fact that there's segments, and I still think there'll be segments in it that just won't work, but I think you will see a film slightly differently, and I think that's the showcase, or a sign of a talented filmmaker, the sign of a good filmmaker, when he can pull the wool from under your eye, pull the carpet from underneath you, and just completely kind of give you a 180 and to say, this is not the film you expected you were getting. Would you I suppose, I mean, I know if it's on TV or anything like that, but would you seek out Malignant again and give it another viewing?
I would watch it again. I would watch it again in a cinema full of people that have already seen it. This was like a good example of, like, you know, all those stories you hear from people in America going to see packed shows of The Room and like quoting it and, you know, having fun with Tommy Wiseau, everything being ridiculous, and, you know, people, hello doggy, like people quoting it, like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I would sit in an audience and happily watch Malignant with 200 horror fans who know every line, and, you know, everybody singing along to "Where Is My Mind," and people pointing out all of the crazy characters in the prison cell scene. Like, why is that woman dressed as a go-go dancer from the 70s? Why is Zoe Bell dressed as a butch woman with a mullet? Who knows? But it's the fun of watching it.
Why is Pam Grier there? Why is she just there for literally? I'm being honest, and it's, again, you know, it's a stick you can beat at a lot of films. It's a stick you can throw at a lot of films, but that, apart from the aforementioned sassy detective that we have, I think she's, unless I'm very wrong here, I think she's one of the only, or one of the few, you know, black performers in that film, and she literally just shows up, and it's literally like, right, okay, you may as well just you may as well just have got Pam Grier just for that role. I don't know. I mean, it's, you know, it's a discussion I know in cinema right now, but I just was like, right, if that's what you're gonna do, if you're, people are calling out for representation, and that's what you can kind of, the only thing you can serve up, it is a criticism of the film. Like, unless, again, Adam, unless I've missed something massively, but it was one of the things I noticed, like, right, okay, one of the few black performers you have, you show her up, you bring her up, she's literally a walking stereotype, and then of course she has to get minced quite horribly. Spoiler. But I don't know, I think the thing I liked about this, and it becomes more apparent in the film's latter stages, is just the sheer campy fun of it. Coming back to what you said, I think when you're watching it at the time, first time round, all those sequences early on, those kind of cringeworthy exchanges that we've both mentioned, I think on a second viewing you probably see not only them for what they are, but you see the film for what it is. Mm-hmm. And it's just in the same way, like, I suppose to an extent, like the Coens, for all their kind of No Country for Old Men, we also have Burn After Reading by the Coens, when they're just allowed to go and say, right, there you go, this project is going to be good for you as filmmakers, go burn off some steam. I get a sense that this is what James Wan has been allowed to do. Burn off some steam. You've delivered Aquaman. You give the world a drumming octopus, so boom, you're done. Go away and make Aquaman 2, but just before you do that, way off, and for whatever it is, 2-3 weeks, go and make whatever the fuck you want, James. This is what you've made? Right, okay. Go for it. No bother, James. Away you go. I don't know. I feel like a hypocrite in the sense that I criticize Candyman for not being scary, and yet I'm saying this film didn't scare me, but I enjoyed it. But then I don't think it's two very different type of horror films, two very, very different horror films. This is kind of verging on kind of the more, by the time it reaches its latter stages, more kind of action horror kind of territory. I know the kind of motif that Candyman's trying to do, and I think, as I said on the podcast, my problem with it was the film was just too bogged down by trying to convey real world horrors than trying to give us any supernatural chills. But like, listen to the Candyman podcast to hear my thoughts in full. I don't really want to kind of expand on them again, but I think of the two, I think I'm maybe more upbeat about this film than you.
I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know if I can recommend this.
So what was the last film you can remember that had that kind of reaction? Were you just, because, and funny enough, I don't think I mentioned it, but you mentioned Possum. There is another film that, if people have never seen it, seek it out. You talk about a film that creeped me. That is a film that absolutely... I talk about, as I mentioned earlier on, about a film that might not necessarily scare me at the time, although there is some terrifying visual sequences in Possum. it's a film that gets underneath your skin and stays there, and you find yourself thinking about it or thinking about visual sequences. And that's what a horror film, because this all stems from, I seen a discussion on Twitter. It was a thread, I forget what reviewer it was saying that people saying, or critics saying in a horror film, I wasn't scared, is such a cop-out. And I whilst I understand that statement, I kind of get it. It's the fact that I don't need to be scared by a horror film to enjoy it. Like, look at Us.
Mm-hmm.
Us didn't scare me, but again, it got under my skin. It made me think about stuff, and even like, okay, Get Out at times did scare me, but Get Out, as I said in the Candyman podcast, you know, there is a film that by the time it reaches its latter stages, I feel challenged as a white, middle-class, nearly 40-year-old viewer, and I realised that maybe prejudices that I had inherently, I can see them, that they're there, and I feel challenged, and that's why I love that film, and that's why it rightfully won us an Oscar, as I said last week. But I don't think Malignant will be winning an Oscar. I could be wrong. I don't know. Stranger things have happened. But it didn't scare me, but I think by the time it reached its latter stage, it wasn't trying to. I think James Wan just didn't give a fuck and just went for it and just said, yeah, fuck it. Let's just go for it. And yeah, I mean, again, I apologise, Adam. I went off another little rambly rant there, but I'm trying to think, like, what I think I asked you, I don't know if you answered me that, but what was the last film that you can remember having that kind of reaction? I'm trying to think. The last film I can actually tell you now, the last film I can have a similar reaction, and it's only because I rewatched it because it was on TV a couple of days ago, I think on BBC Two, I think, over the weekend. Sorry to Bother You. Mm-hmm. There is a film that started out as one thing. You think, okay, this is where it's going to go. And I'm sorry if you saw at any point where Sorry to Bother You was going to go. If you saw that film's going to go, you need to pick some numbers for the lotto, because you're going to win the lotto, because that's the only way I can put it. I love that film. I adore that film because it's so bonkers. But I know at the time when I walked out, I was like, what the fuck did I just watch?
Yeah.
I didn't have that so much here, in kind of sense of what the fuck did I just watch. It's the kind of sense of like, fuck it, it's just James Wan just letting off some steam. But what about you? What was the last kind of film you can remember a similar kind of reaction to?
I think I said at the start of the review, I would compare it to M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening.
That film's terrible, Adam.
I know it is, but going into it, like, if you remember the trailers for it, it was like people were like killing themselves, jumping off buildings, hanging themselves from trees, and you were like, fuck, what's happening? Like, what is happening? Something sinister's going on here, and then you realize it's just the wind. Whereas Malignant, with the advertising, it's kind of like, oh, it's a serial killer, it's Giallo inspired, it's, you know, the Black Glove killer, what's going to happen? She's seeing visions, and then it's just retracted statement spoiler. Even with Sorry to Bother You, it's like, oh, he's trying to get a job. Horse penis? What? It's like, I think The Happening is kind of like that movie where it is terrible, but the premise of it, there's images in The Happening at the start when they're driving down the road and people are hanging from trees. That still sticks with me, even though it's 12 years old. The rest of the film is terrible. But the stuff like that, whereas like in Malignant, it sets up stuff that I was really impressed with. Like in the trailer, I was like, I can't fucking wait to see this. And then whenever I seen it in the movie, I didn't know what to think of it. I'm on the fence. I don't know. I would recommend it to people. Like, it's what it is how I would recommend it. If Blockbuster or Extravision was still a thing, and on the bottom shelf of the horror section, you seen Malignant, and you were like, what's this? That's the only way I would be like, if I was working behind the till, I'd be like, here, you want to fucking watch Malignant? It is next level shit. But if you are, Joe Blogs off the street, I'm going to go see the new Conjuring movie, going into a screening, and you're coming out going, ah, that's fucking shit. It's not for you.
Yeah, but sadly those wankers are going to go to the cinema anyway, because I know there's a few of them. There was a few of them at our screening at the Odeon. As we've said many a times, it's great the cinema's back, but sadly so too are the cinema wankers. And I think it's maybe time for us to bring back at some point the Cinema Wanker of the Week feature. We tried a while ago, but we just haven't had enough experience. But I know there was ones in our screening. I don't know what they were at, and it just seems to be those mainstream horror films. Because it was the same when my wife and I went to see Freaky. They had the same kind of things like, this isn't fucking scary, mate. This isn't, what the fuck? They're trying to be fucking funny. Why is Vince Vaughn kissing him? For fuck's sake. But I haven't been as close in a long time to popping my head, to having the courage to pop my head through the cinema seat and say, because there was just two guys, it was three guys in total, and one of them actually got up and left for ages and then came back in. So I don't know what the fuck type of film he thought he saw, but this other guy's like, I don't get this. What the fuck? What the fuck's going on here? Like, I don't get this. And I really, at one point, just wanted to pop my head, go and said, look, mate, you're not gonna fucking get it. Just shut the fuck up and watch the film. And I mean, it's a podcast discussion for another day. We will bring back the Cinema Wanker of the Week feature. We will bring back the Cinema Wanker of the Week feature. I promise you, listeners. But look, as I say, I enjoyed it for what it was. You mentioned The Happening. Anyone ever mentions The Happening to me, there's only one sequence, and it's Mark Wahlberg talking to a tree. Or he's talking to, and he kind of, there's a point where he actually turns almost straight to the audience and goes, I'm still talking to a tree. And you're like, for fuck's sake, we know, Mark, we fucking know. And yeah, I don't like that film a lot. I know we've had a bit of a M. Night Shyamalan, if that works, of late, but no, The Happening was one of the films where it was like, you're not Alfred Hitchcock, son. You're not that The Great New Hope. Anyway, look, we have talked quite a bit. We are getting a bit rambly. I'm gonna actually, we started this last week with Shang-Chi, Adam, and I'm gonna put you on the spot in just a minute by recommending a film for our listeners. So if they come away from watching Malignant and they enjoy it, I know you've put a few out here, so you may already have those picked, but I'm going to ask you to recommend a film to our listeners based on Malignant, if they enjoyed it, if they hated it, something that they might want to seek out. But before we do that, we have one more interview to play this week, and that is with Irish filmmaker Christine Molloy. She's one half of the directorial duo behind Rose Plays Julie. It's out in cinemas now. I know it's playing at the Queen's Film Theatre from this weekend, and I'm a big fan of this film. I was talking about it on the TV show, got a chance to interview Christine about the film. I think it's fab, and here's that interview.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Have you seen him?
No. Yes, I have. From a distance a couple of times.
I see.
Doesn't it bother you that he's out there, acting as if nothing happened?
See?
That's how it looked to me. And I am struggling.
And I'm joined now here in the NVTV studio by one half of the directorial duo behind the film, Christine Molloy. Hello, Christine.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for giving up your time to come into the studio. I know you have a busy schedule. You're attending a Q&A session at the
That's
TFT.
right, yeah.
So let's just cut to the chase. Tell our viewers as much as you want them to know about Rose Plays Julie.
At its very simplest, Rose Plays Julie is a film about a young woman called Rose, and she's a veterinary student in a university. And we discover, I think, quite early on that she's adopted, and she's arrived at a moment in her life where she wants to know who her birth parents are. So she wants to align two different parts of her life together the part of her life, which is the life of Rose, the happy young woman who's been brought up in a happy family environment, and the unresolved part of her life, which is identified as Julie, the name on her birth cert that her birth mother gave her before she gave her up for adoption. So she wants to understand who she is, and she feels she doesn't know who she is. So she sets out in a quest to try and trace her birth mother and her birth father, and does this in quite an unorthodox way. And in this quest, Rose discovers some pretty dark secrets about how she came into the world, and an act of violence that led to her conception. And so maybe the relief she was hoping to find in this journey to trace her birth parents turns into something very destabilizing. So whatever sense she had about herself and the world, that rug has been pulled from under her feet now, in a more dramatic way than she could ever have imagined, and a more traumatic way. And unable to stick with that, she decides then to go after her birth father so that she can confront him and challenge him in the way that she feels she needs to. But I think ultimately the film, we would describe it also as a love story between a mother and a daughter as they gradually begin to understand each other and allow that love and that bond between them to exist.
Yeah, very delicately put, I have to say. I've seen the film. I was very impressed by it. I know we're going to be reviewing it on next week's show, so I don't want to talk too much at this stage about it, but it definitely is one of those films that starts as one thing and then takes you down an unexpected path. Can I ask, what was the genesis of the idea? What was the acorn of an idea that formed the basis of Rose Plays Julie, and then how did that get unpacked and evolve into what we finally see on screen?
Yeah, it probably started because we started the whole process so many years ago, back in 2014. It's hard to know exactly what came first, because you start effectively with a blank sheet of paper if you're developing a new story rather than using a pre-existing story. So it always starts with maybe a series of questions. And we had made a film called Helen about a young woman who had grown up in the care system. And at the age of 18, when you leave the care system, you're entitled to have access to your personal files. And the question that character Helen had was, was I loved? And she discovers through what's the information that's in the files that she was loved. So although her parents had to give her over to the care of the state, she was brought into the world through an act of love. And we were curious and wanted to think about a character not unlike Helen, who's adopted and discovers that actually it wasn't love that brought her into the world, it was an act of hate and an act of violence. So that was one thing we knew we wanted to look at. And what informed that was a story from when I was a teenager, growing up in Dublin, and being with some friends one day, and we found ourselves walking back from an afternoon picking blackberries, and just telling stories to each other as teenagers do. And my friend told me a story about an auntie of hers who was in England, and she was being persecuted by this guy in a bar, and she ran out into the street, ran into a police officer who said that, he'd take care of her and bring her home. But actually on the way home, he raped her, and she was then left pregnant as a result of the rape. And she decided to hold on to the pregnancy and have the child. And she brought up the son, this rape-conceived son. And I don't know, in my mind at 16, I don't think I'd ever thought that rape might lead to the birth of a child. And it is the only crime that would have such an outcome. And it just stuck in my head. We were all shocked. We just couldn't believe the story, and it stuck in my head. And then that came together with this interest in ours in revisiting some of the themes in our earlier film, Helen. And the other thing that we were interested in was to to work with these three archetypal characters, the child, the mother and the father, and to set a story that would allow something to be put into motion where you know that there's going to be a day of reckoning. So I wouldn't quite call it a revenge story, but it's got revenge elements in it. And I know you say it starts off as one film and becomes something else, but in our minds, it's the same journey, because normally, you know, people who end up in adoption, there's often some kind of a harrowing or difficult or traumatic story that might have led to a decision like that being made. And we were thinking about, you know, Ireland's kind of dark history of how you deal with unwanted pregnancies, not just in Ireland, but in other places, how we deal with things like questions around sexual violence or any kind of violence, and our appalling inability to confront it and to deal with this properly. So I guess all of that stuff was in the mix when we were thinking about the film. And then for us, we like to then root that in very specific things, like where do the characters work, for example, or what are they doing with their day-to-day life? And that begins to inform the story in more nuanced ways.
If I could ask, you know, how does it yourself and Joe Lawler, who you're writing with and directing with in this project, I do want to ask you about your kind of that partnership, but I want to ask you just with what you're mentioning there, how did you find that process of dealing with and handling with some pretty sensitive subject matter? You know, there's a few things that were really important to myself and Joe at the beginning of the process. Number one, that in the film we weren't going to depict any acts of violence being inflicted on any of the characters in our film. So that was really important, because I think those kind of tropes in movies are so, you know, par for the course. It's you know, we're numb to the fact that you know, so often when we turn on a film or we go to a cinema to watch a film, people get horribly murdered and tortured or abused. And we didn't want that depicted on the screen. We also didn't want either of our two female characters to die. We wanted the journey that they were going to go on to be a journey, as I said, towards a kind of a story about love. At the same time, we knew that the male character who had carried out this terrible act of violence was going to get his comeuppance. And then it's just, well, how and what do you give, that in terms of the story, what do you give control over to? And we also knew that we wanted to keep it within this relationship between these three people, rather than, say, trying to you know, work it out through the justice system. It had to be worked out between the three of them. Yes, you know, we were hugely mindful of the fact we were dealing with some very dark themes and, you know, important issues around rape and misogyny and female violence, or violence against women in our story. And you know, we wanted to focus on the impact, because rape, again, is like a trope. Women get raped in films all the time, and they get brutally raped on the screen in front of our eyes. And we don't often stay with the impact of that act. And that's really what was at the heart of what we were trying to do. The impact of an act like that through decades and through generations. And to stay with that, rather than, you know, muddying the water by, you know, questioning whether the rape happened, for example, which is a familiar theme in films, or actually depicting it on the screen. We don't need to see it to know that it's brutal and it's dehumanizing and it's awful. What we wanted to do was to try and understand that through the two women who are impacted by it. There's things I'd love to come back to if we had time, but I also fear we might venture too much into spoiler territory regarding the film. But if I could come back to that point and speaking more broadly, what's that partnership like in firms with yourself and Joe from a writing point of view and directing point of view? What way's that structure with yourselves? Is there a structure in place between the two of yourselves?
We've been working together for a long time. So myself and Joe grew up around the corner from each other in Dublin in the 70s and 80s. I'm letting you know what age I am now. And we've been working together more or less since then, since I was a teenager anyway, and Joe was 20. And so it's something that we know and we don't think about. We were involved in community arts work in Dublin in the 80s before we came over to the UK to study theatre together. And although Joe was a year ahead of me, we wanted some kind of distance. So he had he went through university separately to me, but we both studied on the same course, and then we set up a theatre company and we made devised work together. So that's what we know and that's what we do. And we're also married, and we have a child together. And for me, I think it just simplifies things for two reasons. Working in the arts and on our projects is pretty all-consuming. And if both of us are going through that together at the same time, it just makes things easier because you know why somebody is pulling the hair out, because you're probably pulling your hair out too. And at the moments when you actually, achieve something and make the work, you can both enjoy it together at the same time. So I think it makes life easier rather than more difficult. And then the other thing is that most of the work we've done, though that kind of work is collaborative anyway, so filmmaking is completely 100% collaborative from beginning to end, and it takes lots of different people along the way to make it happen. So that just gets kind of stitched and woven into our work across the board from the very beginning of a project until the end. And we also know our strengths and weaknesses at this stage, I hope. And so after all these years, so we don't, as I said, we don't really think about it. We just do it at different, like writing is different to directing, which is different to editing. And we do all three parts of the filmmaking process. So we write, direct and edit our work. And so maybe directing is the most challenging in terms of, really knowing day to day how it works, because we don't direct that often, weirdly enough, because we write, we don't get to direct very often. So you're trying to figure it out in the moment as it's happening, working with the rest of your crew. We're trying to we're trying to understand how we're going to work together. We don't go in with a game plan. We figure it out as we go along. But with writing and editing, we just know what works best.
How have you found the festival circuit? How have you found the journey for Rose Plays, Julie? Because we were just saying before the recording that it played at the London Film Festival in 2019, one of the last supposed kind of normal festivals before the COVID pandemic. How have you found the film's journey on the festival circuit, and now to be getting it released now in 2021?
Oh, I tell you, we are just so pleased that we got to the London Film Festival. We were pleased anyway, and it was a real honour to be screening the film in competition. In London, they screen the film 5 times if you're in competition and in bigger cinemas. So you get to sit with the film with audiences a number of times, which is a brilliant feeling and a really great experience, because that's really what it's all about. We also got to screen in the Dublin Film Festival, and that was the very last mad night I had. It was a really brilliant night, and we all kind of fell into the pub for hours after the screening, which all seems surreal and bizarre now. But again, we got to see our film with a big audience, and you learn other things about the film. Like, we believe there's little moments of humour in the film, and it was really important to us to try and place moments of humour to maybe break the atmosphere or to bring some other layer into the film, because it's a dark film. And it was very gratifying to sit in an audience and to know that audiences were paying attention and picking up on the humour. It's not laugh out loud funny moments, but they really did. It seemed like they really appreciated that there were those little moments along the way. So you don't know that unless you've watched it with an audience. And then the next festival that we were meant to screen in was the Belfast Film Festival. And that was the very first festival that we were signed up to do that cancelled. And then it was like this domino effect. And then at some stage, actually I think it was around the Galway Film Festival, festivals began to understand a way that they could do everything online. So it went from everything being cancelled to everything just being presented in a different way. So yeah, it was a very unexpected. Everybody was trying to understand it as it was happening, and you're trying to feel your way. But I really have to say that those screenings in London and Dublin made all the difference to us. It kind of lessened the disappointment of all the cancelled festivals or the festivals that went online, because we'd at least seen it with an audience.
My last question, because I said I know you're pushed for time, Christine, and I ask this to any Irish filmmaker at the minute: what does it feel like to be part of what I've described several times, the Irish new wave of cinema? It just seems that there has been an emergence of new, vibrant storytellers emerging, not just telling stories on a local scene, but on a global scene. What does it feel to be part of that scene?
I mean, I think it's very exciting. I would say that, in Ireland, in a way, it punches above its weight. It's a small country. The film scene has grown over the past few years. There's a lot of confidence. I mean, I would say that we live in the UK, although we've made work in Ireland over the years, so we don't feel completely in the scene. I feel a little bit more on the periphery because we don't live here, so we can, we come in and out of it. But I find it just very exciting the way, the films are being nurtured and filmmakers are being nurtured. And Ireland was pretty progressive in the early days of the whole Me Too movement, or the the necessary need to just diversify and have other voices, making work, and other kinds of films that are, focused in a different way. So I think, again, Ireland was pretty progressive. It stuck its neck out and has put a lot of really good schemes in place to support filmmakers. Having said that, I recently rewatched a film that I hadn't watched for absolutely years called Maeve by Pat Murphy. And that is a pretty remarkable piece of work and a really important part of cinema history, never mind just Irish cinema history. And it feels to me that, that it's possibly been forgotten or overlooked or, needs to be seen by new filmmakers coming through, because the fact that in the 1980s, was it made in 1980 or the late 70s, early 80s, a film like that got made and supported is quite phenomenal. So, it's important that you always try and build when things are strong, when there's a lot of confidence, just support us and try and build.
Christine, thank you very much for your time. The film, as we said at the start of this interview, is out on the 17th of September. Seek it out at your local multiplex.
Thank you, Jim, for having me.
So that's my interview with Christine Molloy, and as I said, the film is out in cinemas this weekend. Adam, we are going to wrap up this week's show. We are going to let you go because I'm sure you have better things to be doing on an evening than chatting to me about Malignant. And you have better things to be doing on an evening than talking to me about Malignant. But just before we let you go, just before the interview with Christine, I asked you to think of a horror film. Maybe you're going to pull out something you've already mentioned. Maybe you're going to go for a wild card, something that you haven't already mentioned at all. But what would be a film, if they've watched this, what do you think they should seek out and give a viewing to? Please don't say The Happening. Please don't say The Happening.
I think you should go and check out the 80s horror movie Brain Damage. Brain Damage is a 1988 movie by Frank Henenlotter, who directed Basket Case, which I've talked about a few times. And the description is an unwary teenager falls into a deadly relationship with a centuries-old parasite that thrives on human brains.
I can see that being. I can see where you're going with that one.
Don't Google image it and don't watch a trailer. Just strap in.
See, now I'm trying to think of something. I'm not going to go as something as kind of not on the nose, but as similar-ish as that. I'm going to go. If you're going to go for, I'm going to go for a film that I would definitely say, just because I've mentioned it already, if you want to go for the same type of cinematic experience of going in, sitting down in your cinema seat or sitting down at home and watching one film, and then by the end of it going, what the fuck did I just watch? You're not going to get beat by Sorry to Bother You, and if you've never seen it, seek it out. But if we're going to go similar vibes, Adam, I'm going to go for a Dario Argento film. And I'm not going to go for Suspiria. I'm not going to go for Inferno or anything like that. I mean, I love those films. I genuinely do. I'm going to go for Philomena. I think I've mentioned it earlier on, but for a film that you just have to go with it. You just have to go with the simple concept that Jennifer Connelly can speak to insects. That's it. She can speak to the insects, and they can speak to her. And I'm not even going to spoil the revelation of the identity of the killer, because it's just one of the few minutes that Richard Davis, who hasn't been on this podcast for quite some time, because I know he's moved to England now, and he recommended that film to me very early on when we started doing this podcast, and I just enjoyed the hell out of it. So that would be my recommendation. Sorry to Bother You, for the same kind of experience as what I had watching Malignant. And then if you want to go for something that this film is holding a love letter to, it's holding a candle to, if you want to go watch a film that this film is holding a candle to, watch a film like Philomena, watch The Card Player, stuff like that, schlocky Dario Argento, and then if you like those, go back and then watch Tenebrae, watch Suspiria, watch Inferno, watch all that kind of stuff, because they're just an absolute joy. So look, I don't know, Adam, I think that's pretty much us out of time. I think there's not much else for us to say, Adam, so all it's really there for me to do now at this stage is thank you very much for giving up your time this Thursday evening for chatting to me about Malignant, and hopefully you will give it another viewing, and it'll be interesting to see what you think of the film on a second go.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jim. And like I said, if there's an event on where a lot of horror fans, when they get together, and we'll all sit and throw rice at the screen, and we'll all quote, I was adopted. We'll all have fun with it.
I think that's just a direct kind of challenge for us to screen it now. I think that's what we're going to have to do. So I think we'll have to give it like 10 years. So Banterflix has to keep going for 10 years. The Dark Hedges has to keep going for 10 years. Because the film has to build up its cult status, I think. So yeah, that's a promise. You've heard it here first, listeners. Banterflix will screen in 10 years' time for the 10th anniversary. We will screen Malignant. And if James Wan, if you're listening, if you want to come, we'll put you up in Belfast. It'll be a lot of fun. People be just excited to see you as they have been as excited to see Taylor Swift. We haven't even mentioned that. Taylor Swift was in Belfast.
I couldn't name you 2 Taylor Swift songs, Jim.
You're just too cool for school. But secretly, what our listeners can't see is Adam has a Taylor Swift t-shirt, Taylor Swift tattoo, everything. He's just pretending to be cool. But that is a discussion for another day. So thank you very much, Adam. Thank you very much, listeners, for listening to this show. If you've made it through to the end, and if you've enjoyed the experience, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you never miss a single episode, and check out our website where you'll find the complete back catalogue of all this cinematic nonsense, not just of this podcast. We need to talk about movies, but we also have Crime Scene to Screen, hosted by Banterflix's resident sleuth sisters, Therese Ray and Joe McElroy, and we also have Talking Cosplay, hosted by Gabrielle Ridioff. So there's loads there. It's not just me talking my usual brand of cinematic nonsense. So that's us. So thank you very much. Goodbye.
This has been We Need to Talk About Movies. Thanks for listening. For more information, visit banterflix.com. See you next time.